Commander Du Yun stood at the viewing window of his ship, watching Earth grow larger as they approached. The massive transport vessel carried 6 of the Galactic Alliance's most advanced TX-9000 battle mechs, each standing 50 meters tall. He smiled, thinking about how impressed the humans would be. "Sir, we're receiving landing coordinates from Earth's Space Command," Officer Sangmin reported from his station. "They've cleared the landing pad at their main military base." Du Yun nodded. "Good. Make sure the battle mechs are ready for immediate display when we land. I want these humans to understand the power they're dealing with." The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, breaking through the clouds to reveal a sprawling military complex below. As they landed, Du Yun saw a group of humans waiting on the landing pad. They looked so small from the ship's bridge. The landing ramp lowered with a quiet hiss, and Du Yun led his team out to meet the humans. A woman in a crisp military uniform stepped forward. Her name tag read Captain Jai Yun. "Welcome to Earth, Commander Du Yun," she said with a bright smile. "We're excited to begin this technology exchange program." Du Yun bowed slightly. "Thank you, Captain. Shall we proceed with the demonstration of our battle mechs?" "Of course." Jai Yun's eyes lit up. "But first, would you like to meet our engineering team? They've been studying the preliminary specs you sent, and they have some interesting questions." Du Yun followed her to a nearby hangar, where several humans were gathered around holographic displays showing the battle mech designs. A tall man with glasses looked up from the displays. "Commander, this is our chief engineer, Tadawun," Jai Yun said. "He's very interested in your mech's propulsion systems." "The power output is remarkable," Tadawun said, pointing to the specs. "But I'm curious about the speed limitations. Have you ever tested them at maximum velocity?" Du Yun frowned. "These are battle mechs, Engineer Tadawun. They're designed for combat, not speed trials." "But with this kind of power plant," another engineer named He Jun joined in, "they must be capable of incredible speeds, especially if you adjust the power distribution. And perhaps we should move on to the combat demonstration," Du Yun interrupted, feeling uncomfortable with their focus on speed rather than firepower. They walked out to the testing grounds, where the 6 battle mechs stood in perfect formation. Du Yun expected gasps of awe or nervous whispers from the humans. Instead, they were talking excitedly among themselves, pointing at various parts of the mechs with enthusiastic gestures. "The joint articulation is amazing," He Jun said. "Think about the cornering potential." "Cornering?" Du Yun asked, confused. "These are for battlefield maneuvers, not—" "Commander," Captain Jai Yun stepped closer, her eyes sparkling with an idea. "What would you say to a different kind of demonstration? One that might show these machines' capabilities in a way you haven't considered before." Before Du Yun could answer, He Jun called out from where he was examining one of the mech's legs. "Captain, these servo motors could definitely handle high-speed turns, and if we modify the stabilization systems—" "Modified?" Du Yun felt a headache coming on. These humans weren't reacting at all like he'd expected. Where was the proper respect for these mighty weapons of war? Captain Jai Yun smiled at Du Yun's confused expression. "Commander, would you be interested in seeing what your battle mechs can really do? Not just in combat, but in terms of pure performance." Du Yun looked from the excited humans to his own team. Even Officer Sangmin seemed intrigued by the humans' enthusiasm. "What exactly are you proposing, Captain?" he asked carefully. Jai Yun's grin grew wider. "How about we show you? He Jun here is our best pilot, and I bet he could make your mech move in ways you've never imagined." Looking at their eager faces, Du Yun realized this cultural exchange might be going in a very different direction than he planned. And somehow, despite his military training and years of protocol, he found himself wanting to see exactly what these unusual humans had in mind. The next morning, Commander Du Yun washed nervously as He Jun climbed into the cockpit of the TX-9000 battle mech. The human pilot had spent only 2 hours studying the control systems, Yet he moved with complete confidence. "Are you certain this is safe?" Du Yun asked Captain Jai Yun, who stood beside him at the observation post. "He Jun is our best pilot," she replied. "He can handle anything that moves." She picked up a radio. "Ready when you are, He Jun." The massive battle mech came to life. Its eyes glowed blue, and its joints hummed with power. Du Yun expected the human to start slowly, carefully testing each movement. Instead, He Jun made the mech sprint forward at full speed. "What is he doing?" Du Yun gasped. "These machines aren't meant to." His words stopped as the mech performed a perfect sliding turn, kicking up a cloud of dust. He Jun guided it through a series of swift movements that looked more like a dance than a military exercise. The mech spun, jumped, and wove between obstacles with incredible grace. Officer Sangmin stepped closer to the window. "Sir, I've never seen our mechs move like this. The response time is amazing." After 10 minutes of demonstration, He Jun brought the mech back to its starting position and powered it down. He climbed out of the cockpit with a huge smile on his face. "That was incredible," He Jun said as he joined them. "The control system is so responsive. With a few small changes, this could be the fastest racing machine ever built." "Racing machine." Du Yun's voice rose. "These are advanced military weapons. They cost more than your entire city." Captain Jai Yun placed a calming hand on his arm. "Commander, please hear us out. We have a proposal that could benefit both our peoples." They moved to a conference room where Engineer Ta Wan waited with several holographic displays. He pulled up images of Earth's racing competitions, cars, motorcycles, and various other vehicles competing on challenging courses. "Racing has always pushed our technology forward," Ta Wan explained. "It tests machines to their limits and helps us find ways to make them better." "We're proposing a friendly competition," Jai Yun continued. "Your pilots against ours, using the battle mechs on a specially designed course. It would show off your amazing technology while helping us learn from each other." Du Yun looked at his second-in-command. To his surprise, Sangmin was nodding thoughtfully. "Sir," Sangmin said quietly, "did you notice how quickly He Jun mastered the control systems? And those maneuvers he performed, they could be useful in combat situations." He Jun stepped forward. "We could set up the course to include combat-relevant challenges. Show how racing skills and battle skills aren't so different." Du Yun walked to the window, watching the massive battle mech standing in the morning sun. These humans had taken one look at his species' proudest military achievement and seen fun, adventure, a chance to push boundaries in a way he had never considered. "The Galactic Alliance Command will never approve this," he said finally. "Actually," Jai Yun smiled, "we already sent them the proposal. They're interested, especially in the potential for improving mech performance and pilot training." Du Yun turned back to the group, surprised. "They approved." "They did," Sangmin confirmed. "They think it could improve relations between our species. And," he hesitated, then grinned, "they want to see if their best pilots can beat the humans." Looking at the eager faces around him, Du Yun felt his military discipline wavering. Perhaps there was something to be learned here. Perhaps these humans, with their strange desire to race everything they encountered, had stumbled onto something important. "Very well," he said finally. "Show me your racing plan. But remember, these are still military machines. They deserve respect." "Of course," He Jun replied seriously. Then he smiled. "They'll get plenty of respect on the racetrack. Now, about those modifications we'd like to make." Du Yun sighed. He had a feeling his life was about to become much more complicated. Engineer Ta Wan's workshop buzzed with activity. 6 massive battle mechs stood in various states of modification, their armor plates carefully removed and systems exposed. The engineer moved between them, directing his team with precise instructions. Commander Du Yun watched from the observation platform, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Each time the humans removed another piece of armor, he felt his anxiety rise. The armor is essential for protection, he protested as Tawan approached him with the latest progress report. With respect, Commander, Tawan replied, showing him a detailed diagram. The armor slows the mechs down. For racing, we need speed and agility. Look at these numbers. The engineer pointed to various calculations on his tablet. Even Du Yun had to admit the results were impressive. Without the heavy armor plates, the mech's power-to-weight ratio improved dramatically. Hejun walked in, wearing his new racing suit. He carried his helmet under one arm and smiled at the two of them. "Wait until you see what we've done with the cooling systems," he said. They walked to the nearest mech. Its internal systems had been completely reorganized. Where there was once a weapons control unit, new cooling systems hummed quietly. The power distribution network had been simplified, focusing all energy on movement and speed. "These modifications," Officer Sangmin said, joining them, "they're actually quite brilliant." He had spent the last few days working closely with the human engineers, learning their methods. The original cooling system was designed for short combat bursts, Tawan explained. "We've rebuilt it for sustained high-performance running. And look at this." He led them to a testing area where they had set up a simulator. The screen showed performance graphs comparing the original Mech specifications to the modified version. "Speed is up by 40%, Hojun said proudly. "Reaction time is better too. The mech responds almost like it can read the pilot's mind." Du Yun studied the numbers carefully. "And you're certain these changes won't damage the basic systems?" "Actually," Sangmin said, "some of these modifications might improve combat performance too. The better cooling system means the mech can fight longer without overheating." A loud cheer erupted from the far end of the workshop. Everyone turned to look. A team of engineers had just finished modifying the leg joints of another mech. The massive machine took a few experimental steps, moving with newfound grace. "Perfect timing," Tawan said. "Would you like to see a test run, Commander?" They moved to the outdoor testing area. Hejun climbed into the modified mech's cockpit, while Tawan explained the changes to Du Yun. "We've adjusted the balance points and redesigned the joint hydraulics. The mech can now turn at much higher speeds without risking a fall." The mech powered up. Its movements were different now, smoother, more fluid. Hejun guided it through a series of quick turns and jumps that would have been impossible with the original design. "Remarkable," Du Yun whispered. Even he couldn't deny the improvement in performance. "And this is just the beginning," Tawan said excitedly. "Once we finish all the modifications, we can start serious race training." Du Yun watched the mech move with its new agility. These humans had taken his war machines and turned them into something else entirely. Something that, he had to admit, was equally impressive in its own way. "When do we start the pilot training program?" he asked finally. Hejun landed the mech and powered it down. "As soon as you're ready, Commander. And don't worry, we'll teach your pilots everything they need to know about racing." Du Yun nodded slowly. "Very well. But please, try not to remove any more armor than absolutely necessary." Tawan and Hejun exchanged grins. They had already drawn up plans to strip down the remaining mechs, but perhaps it was better to let the commander discover that gradually. Early morning sunlight sparkled off the modified battle mechs as they stood in formation on the training field. Hejun walked in front of the assembled pilots, 3 humans and 3 aliens, looking at each of them with a confident smile. "Today," he announced, "we learned to race these beautiful machines." Commander Du Yun watched from the control tower as Hejun began the training session. The human pilot had prepared a special course for the first day, marking it with tall light beacons that glowed bright orange in the morning light. "First rule of mech racing." Hejun's voice came through the speakers. "Forget everything you know about combat movements. Racing is about flow, about becoming one with your machine." The alien pilots looked confused. One of them, Officer Kita, raised his hand. "But the training manual says." "The manual was written for war," Hejun interrupted kindly. We're writing a new manual now. Watch this. Hajun climbed into the nearest Mechs. The massive machine came alive under his touch, its movements smooth and graceful. He guided it through the course, weaving between the beacons at high speed. The Mechs didn't just run. It danced. Amazing, Officer Sangmin whispered from his position next to Du Yun. I've never seen such precise control. One by one, the pilots took their turns. The alien pilots moved cautiously, treating the Mechs like the weapons they were designed to be. The human pilots, however, pushed the machines to their limits, testing how fast they could turn, how smoothly they could slide around corners. You're thinking too much. Hajun called out as Kita carefully guided his Mech through the course. Feel the machine's movements. Let it flow naturally. Du Yun watched as Kita tried again. This time, the alien pilot loosened his grip on the controls slightly. The Mech's movements became smoother, more natural. When Kita completed the course, his time had improved by 30 seconds. Much better. Hajun praised. See how the Mech responds when you trust it. As the day progressed, the differences between human and alien piloting styles began to fade. The alien pilots started to adopt the humans' more fluid approach, while the humans learned from the aliens' precision and discipline. They're learning from each other, Captain Jai-yun said, joining Du Yun in the control tower, just as we hoped they would. By late afternoon, the training field had become a blur of motion as 6 battle mechs raced through increasingly complex patterns. The ground shook with their footsteps, but their movements were surprisingly graceful for such large machines. I never thought I'd see our battle mechs used like this, Du Yun admitted. But I have to say, the pilots' control abilities have improved remarkably. That's because they're having fun, Jai-yun replied with a smile. Sometimes the best way to master something is to enjoy it. The training session ended as the sun began to set. The pilots gathered around Hajun, excitedly discussing their experiences. Even Kita was smiling, his earlier doubts forgotten. Tomorrow, Hajun announced, we'll start practicing actual racing maneuvers. And if you think today was exciting, he grinned, just wait until you try drifting. Drifting? Du Yun asked, alarmed. With 50-meter-tall battle mechs. Jai-yun patted his shoulder sympathetically. Don't worry, Commander. We know what we're doing. Looking at the happy faces of both human and alien pilots, Du Yun wasn't entirely sure about that. But he had to admit, he was curious to see what drifting looked like with a battle mech. The morning of the exhibition race arrived with perfect weather. Thousands of spectators filled the newly built stands around the massive racing circuit. The track stretched for 5 kilometers, featuring sharp turns, jumps, and special obstacles designed to test both speed and control. Senior Commander Yoon He's personal shuttle landed at the VIP area. Du Yun and Jai-yun waited to greet her, both feeling nervous about how the Galactic Alliance's high-ranking official would react to their unconventional use of military equipment. Commander Du Yun, he said as she stepped off her shuttle. I must say, your reports about this project have been most interesting. Her expression remained neutral, making it impossible to tell if she approved or not. Senior Commander, welcome to Earth's first mech racing exhibition, Jai-yun said with a polite bow. We have prepared a special viewing area where you can see the entire course. They led Yoon-hee to the main control tower. Through its wide windows, they could see the 6 modified battle mechs lined up at the starting line. Their armor gleamed in the morning sun, now painted in bright racing colors instead of military camouflage. You removed their weapons, Yoon-hee observed, her voice sharp. We replaced them with additional cooling systems, Engineer Ta-won explained, joining them. The mechs can now operate at full power for much longer periods. Before Yoon-hee could respond, the announcement system came to life. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests, the announcer's voice boomed. Welcome to the first ever intergalactic mech racing exhibition. The crowd cheered. In their cockpits, the pilots ran through their final checks. Hajun, in the lead position, gave a thumbs up to the control tower. "The race will consist of 10 laps," the announcer continued. "Pilots must complete all designated obstacles while maintaining safe racing distance." Officer Sang-min stepped forward with a starting flag. The Mechs' engines hummed louder, their power systems glowing bright blue. 3, 2, 1, begin. The ground shook as 6 massive battle mechs launched forward. Hajun took an early lead, guiding his mechs through the first turn with incredible precision. The alien pilots followed close behind, their weeks of training showing in their smooth movements. "Impossible," Yoon-hee whispered as she watched the mechs navigate the course. "I've never seen them move like this." The race grew more exciting with each lap. The mechs thundered through the course, taking jumps that launched their massive forms through the air, sliding around corners in controlled drifts that threw up huge clouds of dust. Kaita, who had been the most hesitant during training, was now battling Hejun for first place. Their mechs moved side by side through a series of complex obstacles, neither willing to give up the lead. "Look at their response times," Taiwan said proudly. "The modifications have improved their performance beyond our highest expectations." Even Du-Yun found himself caught up in the excitement. When Kita executed a perfect sliding turn to finally take the lead, he cheered along with the crowd. As the race entered its final lap, Du-Yun glanced at Senior Commander Yoon-hee. To his surprise, she was leaning forward in her seat, eyes fixed on the racing mechs, a small smile playing on her lips. "Commander Du-Yun," she said without taking her eyes off the race, "I believe we may need to revise our mech development program. These humans might be onto something important." The crowd's roar reached a new height as Kita crossed the finish line first, with Hejun just half a second behind. The other pilots followed closely, their mechs moving with grace that would have seemed impossible just a few weeks ago. Looking at the cheering crowd, the proud pilots, and the mighty racing mechs, Du-Yun realized that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The day after the exhibition race, Senior Commander Yoon-hee called a meeting in the main conference room. Engineers, pilots, and officials from both species gathered around the large table, watching as she played video recordings from the race. "These performance readings are remarkable," Yoon-hee said, pointing to the data scrolling across the screen. The modified mechs showed a 60% improvement in response time and maneuverability compared to our standard combat configurations. Engineer Ta-Won stood up and walked to the front of the room. "If I may, Senior Commander." When she nodded, he pulled up his own technical diagrams. The racing modifications revealed something interesting about the mech's basic design. The room grew quiet as Ta-Won explained his findings. Even Hejun, usually restless during technical discussions, listened with full attention. By removing the heavy armor and weapon systems, Ta-Won continued, "We discovered that the mech's core structure is far more capable than we realized. The original design limited its potential." Commander Du-Yun leaned forward. "Are you suggesting our military designers made a mistake?" "Not a mistake," Captain Jae-yun interrupted gently. "They designed exactly what they thought they needed, a war machine. But sometimes it takes a completely different perspective to see new possibilities." Yoon-hee stood and walked to the window, watching as maintenance crews prepared the racing mechs for another practice session. "Show me the combat applications," she ordered. Hajun stepped up next, playing a video from his morning practice run. The mechs moved through a series of complex maneuvers, combining racing techniques with traditional combat moves. "Watch this evasive sequence," he said, freezing the video at a key moment. The racing modifications allow the mechs to dodge incoming fire more effectively than traditional armor could protect it. Speed becomes a better defense than heavy plating. Officer Kita joined in, speaking from his experience as both a military pilot and now a racer. "The improved cooling systems mean we can maintain peak performance much longer. In a battle situation, this would give us a significant advantage." The discussion continued for hours as both species shared their insights. Engineers from both sides proposed new ideas, combining military requirements with racing innovations. There's something else, Taiwan added near the end of the meeting. The neural interface we developed for racing. It creates a stronger connection between pilot and machine. The Mechs becomes an extension of the pilot's body. Yoon-hee finally returned to her seat, her expression thoughtful. It seems, she said slowly, that this racing program has given us more than just entertainment. It has shown us the true potential of our technology. Do-Yun looked around the room at the mixed group of humans and aliens, all working together, sharing ideas freely. Just weeks ago, he had worried that the humans were disrespecting their military heritage. Now he understood they had helped enhance it instead. "Senior Commander," he said, "with your permission, I would like to establish a permanent joint development program. We could continue exploring these innovations, combining our military experience with human creativity." Yoon-hee smiled, surprising everyone. "Permission granted, Commander. And one more thing." She paused, looking at each person in the room. "I want to schedule more races. The Galactic Alliance Council should see this for themselves." The room erupted in excited conversation. Jun grinned at Kita, who returned the smile. They had already been planning new racing maneuvers to try. 3 months after the first exhibition race, the Earth's Mech Racing Stadium had become a center of intergalactic activity. News of the human innovation had spread throughout the Galactic Alliance, bringing visitors from dozens of different species. Commander Du-Yun stood in his office, watching through the window as a group of new alien visitors examined a racing mech with obvious excitement. Captain Jae-yun entered, carrying a stack of data tablets. "The registration requests keep coming," she said, placing the tablets on his desk. 15 more species want to join the racing program. They're all sending their best pilots and engineers. Do-Yun picked up one of the tablets. "And what do our military commanders think about this?" Actually, Jae-yun smiled. "They're very pleased. The racing program has led to more technological breakthroughs in 3 months than in the previous 5 years. Outside, Engineer Taiwan was showing the visitors the Mech's modified control system. Several alien engineers took careful notes as he explained the improvements. "It's not just about racing anymore," Jae-yun continued. "Other species have started adapting our ideas for their own technology. The Centaurians have redesigned their space cargo ships using our cooling systems." The door opened, and He-jun rushed in, still wearing his racing suit. "Commander, you need to see this." He activated the room's display screen, showing a news broadcast from another part of the galaxy. On the screen, 2 formerly hostile species were announcing a joint racing team. Their leaders stood together, shaking hands and smiling, while modified battle mechs stood behind them, painted in both species' colors. "This is happening everywhere," He-jun said excitedly. "Species that barely talk to each other are now working together on racing teams." Officer Sang-min entered next, carrying more reports. "Sir, the military applications have exceeded our expectations. The new maneuvering techniques we developed for racing have been approved for combat training. They're calling it the Earth Protocol." Do-Yun sat down at his desk, feeling slightly overwhelmed. When he had first brought the battle mechs to Earth, he had expected a simple technology demonstration. Instead, he had witnessed the birth of something that was changing the entire galaxy. "There's more," Jae-yun said. "The Galactic Alliance Council has officially recognized mech racing as a sport. They want to establish racing centers on every major world. And they want us to help set them up," He-jun added. "They're calling Earth the birthplace of mech racing. Can you believe it?" Through the window, they could see Kita giving a group of new pilots their first racing lesson. The alien pilot had become one of their best instructors, combining military discipline with the free-spirited racing style he had learned from humans. "We're organizing the first galactic championship," Jae-yun said. "Teams from 30 different species have already signed up. The council thinks it will be the biggest sporting event in galaxy's history." Do-Yun looked at the reports, the news broadcast, and the activity outside his window. He thought about how a simple human request to race their battle mechs had grown into something that was bringing the galaxy together. Perhaps, he said slowly, this is what our battle mechs were always meant for. Not just fighting wars, but building bridges between species. Hejun grinned, and setting really impressive speed records. They all laughed, and Du Yun realized that he hadn't thought of the mechs as weapons in a long time. They had become something better. Symbols of unity, innovation, and the unique human ability to find joy in unexpected places. 1 year after the first exhibition race, Earth's Mech Racing Stadium had transformed into the galaxy's premier racing venue. On the morning of the first intergalactic championship, Commander Du Yun stood at his familiar spot by the window, watching the sunrise reflect off hundreds of modified battle mechs. Quite a different sight from when we first arrived, isn't it? Captain Jai Yun said, joining him at the window. The racing grounds now covered 10 times their original size. Dozens of teams from across the galaxy had set up their bases around the main track. Each team's mechs displayed unique colors and designs, representing their home worlds. I received a message from Military Command this morning, Du Yun said. They're officially changing the name from Battle Mechs to Performance Mechs. They said the old name no longer fits their primary use. Jai Yun smiled. Times really have changed. Have you seen the new training center? They walked together to the massive new building where Hejun and Kita were preparing for their first class of the day. Young pilots from 20 different species gathered around them, eager to learn from the pioneers of mech racing. Remember, Hejun was saying to his students, racing isn't just about speed. It's about understanding your mech, feeling its movements, becoming one with the machine. Kaita nodded in agreement. In the military, we were taught to see these mechs as weapons. The humans showed us they could be something more. Now we'll show you what they can really do. In the engineering section, Ta-Won and Officer Sang-min supervised a team of mixed species engineers working on the next generation of racing mechs. The new designs combined innovations from a dozen different worlds, creating machines that were faster, safer, and more elegant than ever before. The latest neural interface is ready for testing, Ta-Won announced. This version adapts to any species' brain patterns. Soon, anyone will be able to pilot these mechs naturally. The stadium began filling with spectators as race time approached. Millions more watched through broadcasts across the galaxy. In the VIP section, Senior Commander Yumi sat with representatives from every major world, all of them united by their enthusiasm for the sport. Du Yun made his way to the announcing booth, where he would help comment on the championship race. Looking down at the starting line, he saw Hejun and Kita preparing their mechs. The two pilots, once separated by their different approaches to the machines, now led the galaxy's top racing team. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all species, Du Yun spoke into the microphone. Welcome to the first Intergalactic Mech Racing Championship. The crowd roared with excitement. On the track, 30 mechs lined up for the start. Their designs showed how far the sport had come. Sleek, purposeful machines built specifically for racing, yet still bearing traces of their battle mech heritage. As Du Yun gave the signal to start, he remembered his first day on Earth, when he had worried about humans disrespecting his military technology. Now he understood that they had given it a greater purpose. The mechs had become a symbol of unity, bringing together species that once viewed each other with suspicion. The race began, and the ground shook with the thunder of 30 racing mechs accelerating toward the first turn. Du Yun smiled, knowing that somewhere in the crowd, new pilots were watching with wide eyes, dreaming of their turn on the track. The legacy of the battle mechs would live on, not in war, but in the pure joy of racing. And that, he said quietly to himself, is the greatest victory of all.